Welcome to the Honest Dog Breeder Podcast with me, your host, Julie Swan, where each week we dive in to discuss all things dog breeding so you can build a breeding business you love, producing dogs that fulfill their owners' dreams. I believe you can have an honest dog breeding program that also pays the bills. So throw those pods in your ears while you're cleaning kennels. I'd love to join you. Welcome back to 12 Days of Breeders. You guys are in for a treat today. Today we have Kari Roach of Choice Paws, and you are just outside Salt Lake in Utah. Kari, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Julie, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's such a good story. All right, so this was not like your original plan, right? So dog breeding wasn't necessarily something you thought about forever.
No, I went to college. I was a pre-med student and was going to be on that track, and I was thinking I'm going to do something in healthcare. And then I met my husband and he was my anatomy TA, and so we changed courses and I ended up staying at home and raising kids. So that was the plan. I guess I was going to retire after raising kids, and I don't know, hit the gym and drink a lot more coffee, I guess.
Yeah, so that was it. All right, so that makes sense. So your kids are um they're they're older now, right?
They are.
Okay.
My youngest is a senior in high
Mhm.
school. And so this kind of all started happening around um, Andrew, my oldest, going off to college and COVID and stuff like that. And I started to see, I was like, okay, what am I gonna do when my kids go off? And we started getting dogs just like everybody else during COVID. And because we thought before we don't have a lifestyle for a dog, we're never home. But just like everybody else's story, and that kind of changed the course and the direction of, I would say like I don't know, hopefully next 20 years. I don't know. I think I can do this for 20 years, maybe.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you're doing a great job. So this makes sense. So this was kind of like a kind of filled in instead of just sitting on watching Netflix every day. You're like, oh, maybe I'll, But how did it actually get started? You were kind of
Well,
looking for what to fill your time with?
exactly. No, I mean, definitely not breeding, just probably having dogs in general. And
Oh, okay.
so, like everybody else in COVID, we were like, okay, we're gonna get a dog. And there were no dogs to be found, as everybody knows. And so,
Great.
what is it? Do better, know better. Anyway, we got
Mhm.
our first dog after a month or so of looking, and probably just a backyard breeder. And she's a lovely dog. She's not a breeding dog. She never was a breeding dog. She was just a pet.
Mhm.
But the second time around, I was like, okay, I really want to get a dog. We're going to do it right. Now I can see what the benefit is of getting from a breeder and having a socialized dog and knowing the parents and the health and everything. So that's when I started to look into getting a dog from a breeder. And there's a lot of breeders here in Utah. And so just started messaging people. And my daughter still really wanted a golden doodle. Our first one was a golden doodle. And so we were looking for another golden doodle and just messaging breeders and asking them. We wanted small still, that kind of
Mhm.
10 to 15 pound size. And there's not a lot of people at that time were doing that size. I think more people were still doing a little bit of the bigger, the minis. And
Mhm.
so finally I had found Jenny from Choice Paws. She was doing both Cavapoos and toy golden doodles, but she was going to be done doing golden doodles, and she was only going to focus on Cavapoos. And so she said she had a friend that had golden doodles. And so, long story short, I ended up becoming a guardian home for Becky at Ruby's Mini Doodles. And then, after a year, when it got a little bit closer for Maple to be breeding, we kind of started talking about, hey, do you think you want to be a whelping guardian? Does that interest you? And I was just like, I think
People
maybe.
who don't know what is a whelping guardian compared to a regular.
Oh, exactly. Yes. So a whelping guardian is the dog, but helps deliver the puppies and raise the puppies. Sometimes it's only a short period of time. Maybe some of the guardians only do a couple weeks, or sometimes they can do it the entire 8 weeks. I ended up doing the entire 8 weeks for Becky, and then let's see, and and then I started doing a couple other litters for her here and there. If she was traveling, I might cover a few weeks for her, stuff like that. And so I really started
Okay.
to you know, practice. It's good to start with your own dog, I think, that lives
Sure.
in your
Because you
home.
know them. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I started having other dogs come in, and that was actually the probably the best of the both worlds, because raising the puppies is the fun part. And then I didn't have to worry about the expenses and the selling or anything like that. So some days I was like, oh, that was it's pretty easy. If somebody changes their mind or backs out, it kind of really wasn't your responsibility. You got to play with the puppies, right?
Yeah, it does take the stress off. Okay, are you relatively close to her?
We are about, they're in Lehigh, a little bit closer to Provo, so maybe
Mhm.
45 minutes or an hour. So that was a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes it wasn't like she could just run up and help me out. I mean, there was a lot of late night Zoom calls, because when you're
Oh,
first
yeah.
learning to deliver puppies, I mean, they were on the phone, and the intent always is for them to come up and help you, but sometimes you just don't have that amount of time, right? And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
um luckily I had still, there's three of us. So Jenny was still friends with Becky and I, and so there was three of us, and we would all be on Zoom calls or bouncing things back and forth, or help, what do you think about this? And we still maintain that relationship now. I mean, I was whelping for Becky for several years before I started doing more for Jenny as her health, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but she
Sure.
was starting to have some significant health problems, and so I was taking a more active role in helping her,
Mhm.
um, either all litters or half litters. Maybe she would do half of them and then I would do half of them. And then after a while we just kind of realized that it was breeding is super taxing on people. I don't know that they understand.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. And so
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest thing that's so exhausting?
um in the beginning, especially, I I would say just the unpredictability. Like, I would sit in the whelping box for like hours because I just didn't know. I thought any minute now they're going to start delivering.
Yeah.
So I would, very, very paranoid about like if I left, what would happen or stuff like that. So some days I felt like, especially with Maple, she had really, really long litters, and I was just starting. So 3 days I would just not leave. I would hardly even eat or
Yeah.
shower. The more experienced you become, you get better with recognizing those subtle signs, better trusting the temperatures, the not eating and stuff like that, and you know your dog's a lot better. And then you do feel like you got hit by a bus after, if you have a nighttime delivery or something like that, right? Um,
Yeah.
Also, I think early on, I think a lot of people don't understand. Just like I sleep next to the litters, and so the moms and the puppies, if they get too far away from the mom, they'll cry, or the mom's in and out of the box, or it's just very restless. And so you're always just sleeping really lightly, checking on them up and down every couple hours. So it's really hard if you don't sleep well, and then you can't, you just don't feel good the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So you're just mostly it's just physically taxing during whelping time.
Yes, I think so. I know with Jenny, it was also very stressful. Um, it's hard when families back out at the last minute, and finding families for puppies. The business side of it is financially sometimes very stressful. And so I think that amount of stress for Jenny too. And then we found out later on there was underlying health conditions, but the problem was is just like the anxiety and the stress and the lack of sleeping. It really is kind of a hard thing, to do your best and show up those puppies,
Yeah.
and your family's day after day when you're just not feeling good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know. I feel like as breeders, it's so helpful if we have good sleep most of the time because we need that to bounce back after all of it. It's a
Right.
lot.
And
So,
and
yeah,
and most breeders, I mean, almost everybody that I know is juggling uh, family life and being a wife, and there's some that even have small jobs outside of the home and stuff like that. And so just to keep all those balls in the air
yeah,
is a lot.
I agree. Do you kind of feel like it's hard to not be, even if you're not full time in the sense of how much you're producing, but do you think it's hard to have another job?
Yeah, it's really hard, especially the difference I notice between being a whelping guardian, there's and actually owning and running the business and being responsible for that
Yeah.
is just tenfold in terms of, now you have a website, and then you have to make phone calls, and you have to save all your receipts and do the
Yeah.
books and stuff like that. So to have a job, even a family is a lot. Like my daughter's a senior in high school. She doesn't need me a lot. My husband can cook his own food. So, Maddie does a lot of her own grocery shopping. So these are just other things that have been taken off of my plate that, um, gosh, I just don't know. Like, I don't know if I would have been very good like 5 years ago when I still had all these other obligations. So I really put it to a lot of breeders that, are wearing all those different hats.
Yeah. Oh, I just think it is hard. It is exhausting. And I think when you add in marketing and trying to get all this stuff, just really, it
Oh,
really,
I mean, when I bought Choice Paws, I didn't know anything of website back end SEO. So again, not only just taking a business that was doing pretty well, like Jenny had her name that was already out there and she had a demand, but at the same time, I only knew how to raise puppies. Like that's what I was good at. But, setting up business structures and emails and I WordPress. I mean, I inherited a super super complicated website. It
yeah.
wasn't just like one of the plug and plays like you can imagine, a
Yeah.
fully functional WordPress, everything was moving, and it was very complicated website. It was
Yeah.
beautiful, but I can't remember. Pushed a couple buttons and crashed the website, and asked my son. I'm like, Andrew, can you fix this? He's like, Mom, do not touch anything. You are not allowed to touch anything on that website. I was like, I don't know what to do.
Oh, oh, yeah, I know. In the beginning, it's hard. Okay, so you mentioned it a couple times. So let's tell us about it. How did this? So eventually, you ended up, I think she had some health concerns, and so you ended up sort of flipping. How did
Right.
that all happen?
So I was whelping for both Becky and Jenny. So Becky, I said she owned Ruby's Mini Doodles
Mhm.
and she was just doing golden doodles, small golden doodles. She focuses mostly, I think, on her English creams now, but she was doing reds, and Ruby is her original dog, and I have a daughter from her, and that's Maple.
Mhm.
And then I was whelping for Jenny. And so, kind of the same philosophy, like all of us don't like to have a lot of litters at the same time. And, sometimes traveling is really, really hard when you're a breeder. And so, uh, Becky had uh, two daughters that are uh, incredible tumblers, like world class, like travel out of the country
Is that
type.
like gymnastics?
It is, but
I'm not
just,
familiar.
yeah. So it's very similar to gymnastics. Like it's kind of over the same umbrella of
Mhm.
gymnastics, but it's not in the Olympics. It's just more of like they do like the trampoline and then the big long back foot, back foot, back foot,
Oh my God.
so it's on a big long, but she's,
So
really
she's
good. And
busy taking them
yes.
around.
And so
Yeah.
she was out of the country a lot. And so that was kind of the thing. So I was whelping more and more for both of them. And we kind of just had a conversation that we were like, well, Jenny, I wonder if we could just switch places. So what if you were more of the whelper, like assisting when you felt better, and then I would just run the business side of it. We tried to figure out like, okay, well, how would this look? So it took about a year of us because she did not, it's really hard to give up something that you have built from the ground up and just kind of say like, okay, I'm giving it up. I'm turning it over to somebody. I mean, that was her baby. So it took a good year for her to kind of decide that, I think for my health and for my family and, for everything around me to say that, I'm gonna retire and and
Hard.
so that's
Yeah.
what she did. She decided to sell to me and I didn't know that I was gonna like, do I really want to buy a business at 50 years old? So that was hard too. A lot of conversations with my husband, like,
Yeah.
it's gonna change a lot how our life looks too if I decide to do this.
So how did you get him on board? Is he just magic?
I'm trying to remember if I mean I think at the end of the day he understood that before we were married and a little bit emotional. I guess you could say I was kind of giving up a lot of what I had planned for myself in
Oh,
future to stay
yeah.
home and raise the kids and follow his career path. And so I think at the end of the day, he's like, you know what? I really want you to have something of your own. You're good at what you do, you're very passionate about it. You did a good job raising our kids, so I don't doubt that you would do a good job raising your puppies and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And so he's like, I really want you to have your own thing. And so I think that was kind of the main thing. And definitely there's days when he's looking a little bit like, how many dogs do we have in the house, or when are those dogs coming? But but at the end of the day, most of the nights he's on board.
That's good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think every breeder's probably husband does the same thing sometimes. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, like I know sometimes Bill looks at me and he's like, "So, when are they going home?"
Yeah.
And for the extra loud litters, like he's like, he'll ask me that like every other day. Like he somehow just forgets when
Yes.
it's like, yeah,
Well, and I again like the litters are in our home and stuff like that. So one of our first things that we did was get rid of the carpet that was in the basement
oh
because
yeah,
we didn't know that, yeah, they would be pooping in the house with moms that had accidents. And so it
yeah,
was like, it was like, having guardian dog homes in the house is hard. Do they get along with your pack that's already there?
yeah.
And I do try to keep everybody pretty quiet. Sometimes he has to sleep during the day. And
Mhm.
so, when you have other dogs come into your house, maybe they're a little more barky or they just, um, they want to be with you all the time. And so it's complicated to do all that.
Oh, I totally agree. So you ended up converting your basement?
Right. So my basement, we have a pretty good size house. And my two boys were down here on the main, like on the second level, and then we had a huge playroom, which as your kids grow up, we didn't use that anymore. And so as my first one went off to college, his room became kind of the primary whelping room. And then, I kept his bed in there and he had this little alcove, which is perfect for a whelping room that we were able to just kind of gate off. And so
Nice.
nice, really private space away from that top level of your house from Amazon guys and stuff like that. And then it goes out to a patio where they can go out and potty. And we took out garden boxes and put rocks down and kind of made it a really nice, like easy, cleanable space. And then as my second one went off to college. I don't think he was 15 minutes down the road and I was cleaning out his room. I mean, I'm like texting him pictures. I'm like, "Do you need this?" He was like, "Oh my gosh." I'm in there in his room like with a measuring tape and everything like that. So anyway, yes, both of my boys probably have no place to come home if they wanted to come home, and the dogs have pretty much taken over that second level of our house, which is just wonderful. It's pretty much all plank vinyl now, so it can be steam cleaned, and I have lots of play areas and
When you're saying second level, is it meaning like is it down low?
it's still above ground actually.
Oh, okay.
So the main floor is up and then our ground floor is second and then there is actually what we call like a basement.
Hmm.
Like our whole house is like walkout and so that
You're
walks
on a hill.
on a hill.
Okay, so this is making more sense now.
Yeah.
So second level was down, but still not your basement.
Right.
Oh, how
Yeah,
fun is
and
that?
like I said, our basement is not really a basement either, and that has a treadmill and stuff like that that never gets used in my husband's office. And then it was a spare bedroom down there as well, and now that's where I take all my pictures and I have a bunch of just other breeding stuff. Like it's pretty much taken over, I would say, like most of the house except for the main level. So we try to keep um like breeding dogs and stuff like that, not on the main level. So
Mhm.
my family dogs, and we have like a lab right now, and so the guardian dogs don't go up there with the lab just because a lot of them, she's very high energy and she's big, and so a lot of my breeding moms would be small and maybe would be, not used to getting playing with Gouda or something like that. So
That makes sense.
the main level we try to just keep for our family and our family dogs and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I think that's so healthy to have a little bit of separation because at the end of the day, you can sort of close the door to your
Yes.
breeding program for a little bit, and I find that that allows breeders to breed for a lot longer and reduces divorce rate. So that's always positive.
It does. And my adult dogs do come down, just not Gouda, like Bagel, Maple, and Minnie, the Golden Doodles and the Cavapoo. They all do come down and help socialize the puppies and play with the puppies and go outside into the deck. But for the guardian moms to come down and have their own space, I think
Yeah.
is really healthy and helpful. And so I'm just really blessed that we have this space and it's in our home. My husband jokes that he's really glad that the rest of the house is getting used because, as your kids
Yeah.
go away and move on, he's like, "What would we do with this big house with just the two of us?" So it's getting used, and it's a really awesome opportunity to that we have that.
Yeah, it sounds like such a great floor plan. I'm a little jealous. So it's beautiful. We don't have basements in Arizona. Like
Right.
nobody really does them, so it's just kind of boring. I know. Um, all right. So, okay, so let's get back to purchasing the business. So you started to switch places. It was a
hmm
little hard for her. How did she end up getting to a place where she was kind of okay with you letting like, or was it very gradual?
It was gradual. What we did, because it was very complicated, and all of her dogs were in guardian homes. And so to navigate that process, I think is very complicated to go to these families and say, like, hey, guess what? Like, I'm really going to sell my business to this person that, maybe they kind of knew me a little bit, but they didn't, they had never interacted with me, or
Sure.
a couple of them I had maybe whelped their moms or something
Mhm.
like that. So that's where we started, was with families that I had worked for. So or worked with. Charlotte, for example, was a Cavalier that I worked with that family and helped. I was involved in setting up the guardian home. So we had a relationship. And so that's what I did, was I started buying and working with a few of the families, and then she sold those dogs to me, and then she maintained, she didn't sell all of them at one time to me. So I think I started with about four, which seemed reasonable. Um, and and then it was about a year or a year and a half later that we kind of worked on just the last few dogs. Like either she retired them or I was able to use them in the program, but I never fully officially purchased them. I did maybe more like a co-own, I think it would be.
Oh, okay. Did
Yeah,
you end up sharing profit on those litters with her?
we did. So
Oh, okay.
I
That was
paid
also good.
her a per price puppy, and how many puppies were born, but I still covered all the breeding expenses. Um,
So she owned the dog and like she had paid for the dog to be used, health testing, whatever. And then
yes.
you ended up raising the litter, taking care of the whelping and rearing costs. And then you guys split the like did you split the profit or did you split the price?
We didn't split. I just paid her
Oh, you just gave her a flat rate.
a flat rate per
Okay.
puppy. So that was
Mhm.
kind of how,
Was that
and
like a 30% or 50%?
we just did actually 500 per puppy.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So you actually did pretty well.
Hmm.
So that's really good.
And that I think it turned out okay. It was very hard because some of these moms, they had had litters, but some of them had not. One of them, there were really long heat cycles and stuff like that. So I just didn't feel comfortable. Like, I don't know if I want to fully purchase them, and I didn't know if they were going to be able to be breeders and,
Hmm.
how big their litters were going to be and stuff like that. So there was a couple of them that, were a little bit more unknowns, families that I just weren't as comfortable with. Like they had
Like
built
you wouldn't
really,
have had them as your guardians if you were picking.
I, not that, I just didn't want to disrupt the relationship that
Oh,
she
okay.
had between them and kind of be in the middle. Some of the families lived closer to her, and so it was really hard to say, okay, well, your mom is going to now be an hour north, and if you want to come and visit her or see the puppies, it's going to be a pretty big inconvenience to you to do that.
Yeah.
So a couple times she started the litter when the mom was still there, and then once the puppies were weaned, the mom went home, and that worked out really well. And then I finished the litter. So we did a couple of those situations as well, just to help the guardians, not feel that, I don't know, that maybe their dog was being moved around all the time or
Yeah,
something
I
like
think it
that.
just felt very like a very respectful solution. Or like if they only had one or two litters left on the Guardian, it made sense to just kind of keep it status quo.
Right,
It's interesting. So we don't talk with many people who have purchased a breeding business or
right.
successfully sold theirs. So it is kind of a unique situation. But what I feel like is you had a very custom approach. Like the business was sold. Like was there a lump sum or was it each piece sort of put together?
Right. So I didn't feel very good about, I don't know, taking family money or asking my husband to front that. I mean, we had kids in college and,
Sure.
stuff like that, and, take out of our savings. And so Jenny was flexible enough and trusting enough, I guess you would say, in that I did pay her upfront kind of a good faith deposit, and then I paid her a little bit each month. But you have to remember too, like I had no cash flow for the first 3 or 4 months or something, but you have breeding expenses, right? So now
Right.
I've got um TCIs and AIs and
Yeah.
stud fees because we didn't actually have our own studs. And so I was running pretty big credit card bills in the beginning. And then when families paid me for the litter, then I would pay her, out of those profits and stuff like that. So it did take, gosh, I think it took a good year. It could have been, I mean, this year, I think I still had some amount that I still had to pay off.
Mhm.
Next year I will have been completely done with that and stuff like that. But so it was a very big ask for her to,
Yeah.
just take on, because then I still had to pay off that credit card, and then I had to pay her, and then I had to get ready for the next breedings that were coming.
Yeah.
Something else that we
Mhm.
probably didn't, I don't think was very clear was that she had skipped several heats right before she had made the decision because she wasn't feeling good. And so I signed the papers in December, but I didn't have any moms that were really coming into heat until in the spring. And
Yeah.
so Becky was so kind. She had a couple poodles that um, she agreed to let me do cavapoos because I was starting to try to build a wait list and build a demand, but yet I had no breeding moms ready. And so she let me do
Sweet.
a couple litters with
Mhm.
her moms and do cavapoos with them. And so I'm eternally grateful. In fact, Mia is that is here now. She is actually owned by Becky, and I did a Cavapoo litter with her about a year ago, and kind of the
Mhm.
same thing. Charlotte was my Cavalier, and she missed her pregnancy. She didn't get pregnant. And I had another mom that was late. And I was like, Becky, do you have any moms that are going to come into heat? And so that relationship has been really good too. Like if you have breeders that, I don't know, you, and it's not an official co-own, but like a friend, it's like, yeah, I
Yeah.
actually was going to skip her. And, so that's another great aspect of the friendships that we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it worked out really well that you did know each other. One of the biggest things I see when breeders purchase a business from other the breeders is that the breeder's like, "I'll help you, I'll help you, I'll help you," and then as soon as they get paid, they're gone. And that was definitely not the situation that you had, but I think it speaks to the relationship you guys had built before then, which is really nice.
It is, and I still talk to Jenny almost every day, if not every couple days. And, she definitely wants to see Choice Paws grow and continue. And she does everything she can to help me from, just, you know, this is a good real idea. Or, we talk about what studs, and she loves
Yeah.
to see me, she loves to find dogs for me. So she will send me all these pictures of puppies for sale or stuff like that. She's like, you should get this one. You should
Yeah.
get this one.
She's always shopping for you.
Yeah, she's
I
she's
know.
my shopper and stuff like that. So, she's definitely very involved when she can behind the scenes. And up until this year, she did do, parts of litters. I mean, she will cover for me if I, have to go on vacation or something like that. But definitely had to take a step back and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
That seemed really, really good. Can you go over, was there a contract? You don't have to give details necessarily on pricing if you
Right.
don't want to, but can you go
And
over some of
again,
the things you did?
probably, and it wasn't really looked over by a lot of lawyers. I had a cousin that I sent it to, and I was like, okay, look, don't get mad because I already signed this. And so hopefully there's nothing really, really bad in
Yeah.
it. But again, we did kind of just, it was drawn up. Um, and what I think was really fair when we were talking about this later on, and you had said, sometimes when you're kind of pricing your program, you do think of like all this, the potential profit. And
Oh,
while
right.
that's true,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you found this, is it hard to convince the buyer to really commit to that? Like, oh, you could make 30,000 on this. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm not gonna pay 30,000 for that mom.
Exactly. And what happens a lot of times is so in the business world, a very, very basic, and obviously this is industry dependent, but a very basic formula is 5 times the profit
Hmm.
of the business. So of the annual profit. So if you're clearing 70,000 a year in a breeding business, then standard business stuff online will tell you, oh, multiply that by 5,
Right.
and now it's 30, 350,000. It's like, no, no, it is not a $350,000 breeding program because the reason that doesn't work is that to get into a breeding business, all you have to do is buy good dogs. So in theory, what you're doing is you're looking at what it would cost to purchase those dogs and build those assets, which is, like you said, usually the price of the moms
Right.
as breeders, maybe, a little bit more for breeding rights.
And
Yeah.
that was, I think she was very fair with that because
Yeah.
she knew that, like, right? She was like,
Sure.
Carrie could continue to work for Becky. She could, just buy her own dogs in, a year and a half, stuff like that. So she priced the program, I would think, to not really make a huge amount of money, probably get back about, and probably just like any other business, you put way more into it that there's not a price tag you can really put on, your time and effort on building something. So it was an extremely fair price when I hear you say, oh, you could have paid 5 times more than that. Because she did. She priced the dogs, a little bit more probably than what she paid, and maybe included a little bit of the health testing and stuff like that. Now, to be fair, some of the moms had had a heat or two, which was good because I did know that they were able to have litters, and I had a little bit of a sense of,
Yeah,
maybe how big the litters would be.
for sure.
But it is still hard to kind of commit to that and say, like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I'm going to pay, X dollars for this, and bought the web page and stuff like that. So that was probably about half of what I paid. And then the other half was the breeding dogs.
Yeah, which makes sense. And I feel like that's very reasonable, right? And then, so you ended up, and this is another thing that people don't really know how to do. So, for example, when I was looking to buy a construction company, we were buying their leads, but they didn't have any assets. They didn't have equipment. They didn't have a crew that we were going to have rights to or anything like that. So we were actually buying their name, but then we were
Yes.
going to use our name. So none of it. So then at the end, I was like, Bill, there's nothing to buy,
Right.
And they're like, well, it's our name. And I'm like, yeah, well, we're not going to use it. That's
Oh,
not
yeah.
our last name. So it wouldn't make
Mhm.
sense. And so at the end of the day, we ended up just not even doing it because we thought we'd at least get equipment, but no. So anyway, it's interesting. So in your perspective, at least you were getting some assets. You were getting the name, you were getting the reputation that came with Choice Paws that you were familiar with, which I think
Mhm.
makes so much sense. So,
Right.
was there a valuation? How were you able to kind of place value on that? Just kind of like a round number or?
Yeah, it was more of just a friendly agreement and stuff like that. So she just took, kind of what she had paid for them.
Mhm.
I know what let's see, she had the website built. And so,
Yeah.
she had that cost. And I think she added maybe a little bit more for the improvements that she had made. Her husband, was really tech savvy. And so, and again, not counting the time that they had put into it, because that's hard to put a number on. But they added a little bit of that. And I think she knew too that this was a big commitment to me. I mean, to buy any business, you don't know, like, well, it's working for them, but am I going to be able to do it? Are people going to trust me now that we have like this change in ownership? And,
Hmm.
they trusted Jenny, but would they trust me?
Yeah.
Or, and it was at the height, I think, of, and it's still a big problem, but like scammers and stuff like that in the dog breeding world. So again, I was like, I don't know, are people gonna like think that I stole her pictures or something? And
I
if
mean,
you
it
go
makes sense, right?
if you go
Yeah.
way, way back, now it's probably 2 years,
Mm.
but you're going to see a totally different person on the Instagram. I didn't go and delete everything. We did some posts, and we have stuff where there's both of us on screen, talking and knowing they're friends. But imagine if you were just scrolling along and you'd followed Choice Paws for a while, and then all of a sudden I did get some emails that would be like, "Hi, Jenny," and I'd have to explain and write back like, my name's Kari and I own Choice Paws now. And I
Yeah.
would get some messages maybe from like previous owners, and they think they were texting Jenny. And so I'd
Yeah.
have to say, you know, tell her the situation, and I would give them Jenny's new Instagram, just a personal, hey, if you want to reach out to her or something like that. So there was this really awkward transition phase.
Sure.
And we did try to get together as much as possible and just help people with that, like have both of our faces on there. And we had like kind of a goodbye live. And again, I think it
Oh,
would be
wow.
really,
Okay.
really hard if you were just purchasing that and that person didn't really want to be involved in that or,
Mhm.
help that transition.
Yeah. And I think a big difference in Jenny compared with a lot of the breeders that I've been on the receiving end working with the person who purchased the
Mhm.
business is a lot of times we get to that burnout phase with our breeding programs. And a lot of breeders are, they want to be done. Like they're
Yes.
so ready to be done. And so they are quick to just get out of it, get a price, something that makes it feel worth it to leave, and then
Mhm.
they're hands off. And so I do think in your situation, Jenny wasn't, she would have continued if it hadn't been for her situation.
Yes.
So
And do you find maybe that the people wait too long before they sell, or can they not find the the buyers in time? So by the time, they're looking and
mhm.
looking, and by the time that happens, yeah, they're just so ready to wash their hands. Like how does that
I
kind
will be
of
honest, I think, and this is my read, so it's just my impression in working with people. Obviously, people come to me when they have problems. When things are working perfectly, they don't come to me. So take that into account. But a lot of times, yes, I think they wait too long. I think a lot of breeders don't have the systems in place. So one of the things that makes a business worth money is systems. So if she had had a fully set up honey book for you, automations, emails, guided, everything, and she said, okay, here's exactly what you need to do, and handed it to you, that would have been one thing, right? That's
yes.
something worth buying. But they don't. And so a lot of times the breeders are they don't have a retirement. They haven't planned for retirement, and this is their income, and they're burned out, and so they need to make something to buy
Yes.
themselves time to figure out where their next income's coming from. And I know that sounds absolutely terrible, but it is what I see most of the
Yeah.
time. So,
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, I'm lucky because my dad is a CPA, so good and bad. That
right.
well, because he worked for the state government and then he worked for the feds and then he did stuff on his own, but he wants everything to be like 100%. Like I have to scan every single receipt and I've got to link it, in my wave accounting or something like that. And he's in there with a fine tooth comb and he's like, well, you can't write this off because like Austin, he lived in this personal space. And so he was like, technically you cannot. But anyway, he kind of helped a lot of that, trying to figure out the assets and the purchase
Nice.
and depreciation of a dog, when they've already had these litters before and then they have two litters left and then a lot of the reality I think we've talked about before is just like, oh, if you keep your own dog, not being able to write that off, where that's a piece that a lot of breeders don't realize is that like, yes, you can, you know, yes, you could have sold for X amount of money, but you don't
Right.
actually get to write that off.
Right. You can only write off what it costs you to produce the dog, which is
Mhm.
usually considerably less. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a huge point. So I can see where it would be like a bummer a little bit when your dad's like, no, sorry. But
Yeah,
at the same time, it is nice because you don't get audited.
exactly. Well,
Yeah.
I hope not. I hope I
Right.
don't. But I can't remember. What's the original question? Just about the selling. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Retirement. And so I think too, a lot of breeders don't realize that, you can, take some of your profits for the year and you really should be paying you and you can, put that into a retirement account. So
Absolutely. Or
yeah,
even if you're purchasing cash flowing assets, like even rental property or anything. There's just so many options. But like you said, the point is don't just spend everything you have,
right.
do something with it. So you can choose to breed and don't you're not forced to breed.
This, I really think it would be hard. I know a lot of breeders kind of pass it down to their kids. And so, that's one thing, but I can't even imagine, I can't even find, guardians, let alone somebody that wants to like
Yeah.
take over a full breeding business. I mean, it's very unique kind of uh,
Hmm.
situation. Like, I don't know, maybe I'd buy a Starbucks franchise or a Tim Hortons or something. I don't know
Right?
before I would like thinking like, oh yeah, I really want to get into this, breeding
You
business. Like, I don't know
and
what
it
the market is for
well,
that.
it goes back to your comment about how many hats breeders are wearing. It's too there are so many hats to wear. To find somebody that can handle each one of them and in a way that will work with your brand is
Right.
very difficult, which is also why it doesn't usually work as well. I think similar to your situation, what I usually see as the most effective hand down, like passing it down to someone, is either a kid who is always involved in it and loves it. But that is usually our children don't always love what we love, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Like when my daughter was 5 and was like, I don't want to be a breeder mom. I was like, okay. And then, but then on the other hand, we sometimes get that great employee who ends up becoming like the kennel manager and they start taking over all the dog care, which is in a way a lot of what you did more or less
Yes.
in the beginning. So became completely familiar with the dog side, said, "Oh, I really like this." And then begrudgingly or not, learned the business side, right? And
Right.
then that handoff can happen. The other thing I see that doesn't work well, but I'll just throw it out there. A lot of breeders think they can just hire everything out, do nothing, and still get paid. I've yet to see it work. I haven't found a single company that's making that work.
That's very interesting. And that's kind of where I am to um it's really hard to give any amount of control to other
Yeah.
people. And in hindsight, I can't believe like, both Jenny and Becky did that for me. And, because they were like, okay, well, I'll let you, raise Maple's litters and stuff like that. And so it's so hard to really, find those people. I think what it was for me was like, I started like, you know, doing things and setting up areas in my house that they could really tell that like, oh, I think she's really serious. So like I had
Yeah.
made this calendar with like, you know, all of the different stages of like, okay, this is when I do ENS and this is when I do ESI. And I showed them, I was like, look at my calendar. It's really cool. And so, and I was buying things like and not
Mhm.
asking for reimbursement, for example. I was just like, no, no, I just want to do this and, stuff like that. So maybe that was part of it. It's just I
Had to
was
like,
just so excited to do it and be part of it. But it is a big ask to find those
yeah.
guardians or to find those employees. They're just as passionate about the breeding, as we are, because it really does
Yeah.
have to be a passion.
I think so. I mean, you had to be a 4.0 student when you were in school. Um, but imagine, I think what often happens, and maybe this is the difference between you and say some other people, right? Because you would be like the most ideal person to sell a business to. Like you get it, you understand it. And when there's a new challenge, you've risen to that challenge to meet it. And I think a lot of times we end up getting people who need a job or need money or don't have a plan. And so they end up scooping poop for us. And we think, wouldn't it be great if they could then whelp puppies and then they could then do customer service and then I could be out of it and they could keep going. And the chances of the person who hired, you hired to scoop poop is probably not the ambition to be the person who runs the business. And that's just the nature of the beast. It's not a bad thing either way. But I think that's the difference, right? For you, the process had intrinsic value.
Right.
It wasn't just a paycheck.
And maybe that is something to be said, if you do have a great guardian or something that really is, comes to you. So for
Yeah.
example, like I it wasn't that they approached me or anything like that. I mean, I had at first I was seeking them out and saying like, I am really interested in being a guardian. Like how often does that happen that you get a cold DM in your Instagram message it's like, you know, I'm looking for a really great dog and, the best way that I found to get like your pick of the litter is to be this thing called a guardian, and I mean, if I would have I don't think I've ever gotten a message to say like I really want to be a guardian for you, because I want to have like the best dog. And so I don't know whatever made me send some of those emails in the beginning because I sent a couple of them and I didn't get any response back. They're probably like crazy lady. But Jenny texted me back and we and then for her to even say like, I'm not going to have any golden doodles, but my friend has a golden doodle and maybe it will work
Ah,
out. And so
sure.
it's really interesting how when I look back, a lot of these things had to fall into place. Like before I was looking at adding that second dog, I really was just kind of called to it. I know it sounds so cheesy, but I kept
No, no, I
to
think it's
people that were like, they would stop me in Home Goods and
yeah.
talk to me for 20 minutes about their dog, and they had just lost their dog and how much this dog had changed their life and everything. And I was like, I just really want to be part of this. Like, I didn't know that dogs were this impactful for people. And I know that it had really helped me and my family through COVID, like it did a lot of other families. But then I just kept seeing these other things and these other people that would kind of come into my life and say, like, you should get another dog. And, it just makes such a big difference. And so I think in hindsight, some of those things that happened, maybe not by pure chance. I don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe just pay attention to those sometimes.
It makes sense. I think you're right. I think the motivations for the involvement, like you said, like, because it is interesting. Sometimes we get so in the rigmarole of problems or managing problems, because that's what we're dealing with on the breeding side, that we forget the magic that we're also creating. And I think you've been very careful to keep that part of it kind of front and center in your business. So,
I do. And I should speak to this. I'm a pretty positive person. So I think temperament wise, in terms of I kind of take the philosophy that, like, let's not worry about a problem until it actually happens, and then we will figure out what to do then, right? So I
like
tried not
catastrophes.
yeah, I try not to worry about things until, they've happened. And if dogs don't pass, health testing or something like that, I took three in, and, you get that pit in your stomach and you start to worry, like, what happens? What happens? Like, "Okay, let's not worry about it. We'll figure things out if something doesn't, work out, and, even I think I find that when I have families back out at the last minute, you know, a day later or a couple hours later, you find like the absolute best fit, and you're like, oh my gosh, is this meant to be? So in breeding, I've tried to keep that perspective, and that really helps my mental state, even when things seem bad. I had a few C-sections. I lost a puppy recently. We've had some, stuck, and but then everything had been like, look, I got three healthy ones. And, yes, we had a C-section, and it costs money, but everybody's healthy. The puppies all made it. The mom is healthy. I really try to keep a positive outlook on, the situation and the health of the moms and the puppies. And, even if things are expensive or don't go 100% smoothly, like that's part of the industry, and your mental state of keeping positive, I think it makes a big difference.
I agree. I think sometimes those positive moments we have to cling to them because like they're the only thing that kind of gets you through the bad days. Like,
Yeah,
I think about that all
absolutely.
the time. Like when I lose a dog, when I had parvo and like you lose them and you think, oh my gosh, and then you're like, can I even do this anymore? And
Right.
then the next litter, everything goes okay. You finally exhale, and then you hand that puppy to those kids, and they're so happy, and you're like, okay, it's kind of worth
Yeah.
it.
Oh, and that was true. She had a couple, she had really bad luck. Like, she not
Mm.
only did, was it stressful, and, she had some of her health problems, but, she just had some really bad, like, I think she had a couple mastitises, and,
Oh,
things that we don't see very often. Like, you could do like, oh, I've had 10 litters and never had that. And I'm like, how did you get all of that within your first five litters or something like that? So she was very unlucky just in terms of just randomness. I'm trying to remember. I know that, one day she was texting me, and I think the mom had not gone into labor, so she took her to the reproductive vet, and they were like, oh, she's really close. And then she started delivering on the way home, in the car. And I'm like, okay, pretty inexperienced in terms of, like, now when I have a mom and I'm transporting somebody, I have like an emergency car kit. We've learned that way, that, like, you don't get into a car without, at least a bulb syringe and some scissors, if you're heading to the vet. So, just some hard lessons early on. And I didn't have to deliver in the car, but I was on my way and I had a guardian. I was gonna like meet up, and she was like, I think she's delivering. And I'm like, okay, stay at home, I'll be there, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, Jenny had a really hard go too. So that, especially that learning curve, just increased stress level, and it's
Oh,
much easier
absolutely.
when you start off having uncomplicated deliveries and stuff like that in the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll put it out there for new breeders who haven't had a litter yet if they're freaking out. Honestly, it is not the norm, right? And usually it's
Right.
easy, right? They're
Uh,
usually pretty good. Um,
Usually it's I had done a lot of litters before I started to see some, stranger things. Like I said, the this was my first litter, in 4 or 5 years now, that I had a puppy that was actually born that just didn't make it. Like if I had some
Mhm.
that were born, they were born sleeping, as you would say in the industry.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my first go around, and, hard, but at the same time, I was kind of grateful. I was like, wow, this I've had a lot of really, really healthy puppies, and I was grateful to have the experience that I had,
Yeah,
to try to help, to do the best I could. But yeah, it is
absolutely.
it's not all as scary for the new breeders. Usually it goes
No.
really easily.
Yeah, usually. And I would, yeah, it's generally not too bad. I
Well,
would,
then usually you're doing your own dogs, right? Like
yes,
that's usually how most people start. So you know them, you have a relationship that helps out a lot versus maybe, a guardian dog that you don't live with full time,
sure.
stuff like
Absolutely. I know. I feel pretty confident I could whelp pretty much any GSP at this point in time and I would kind of be able to handle it. Obviously, like, don't put me in charge of like bulldogs. I don't know anything about them.
right.
I would struggle there, but it's different. And I don't need, we don't, I think after time, you don't need to see the breeding to be able to anticipate when they're going to
Mhm.
be born. And you can kind of tell when they're about to whelp and they don't catch you off guard. I don't think you probably sit in the whelping box for 3 days anymore.
I, I do not. I have a lot of cameras, and we, my husband, he's been around a lot. Although my kids, when they would come down and I would say, oh, somebody's in the middle of delivery, they were always hightailing it out of there. They were like, I don't want to see it. It's scary. Um, but my husband, he's been around and not in the delivery, but he can watch a mom. So it's like I know that I had what did I have last time? I had to be down at South Mountain for some reason, and Mia was here, and I was like, okay, can you just keep an eye on Mia and check in on her or stuff like that. But previously I probably would just not leave and not eat and not shower or something like that. So yeah.
Right? No, that makes so much sense.
And you realize that they can usually do a lot on their own, so why we love to be there,
Yeah.
if you go up and take a shower and the first puppy is born, it probably is going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. I had my most embarrassing moment as a breeder is I went to bed and I had one dog I always put her in the pen with the stud. I never saw her get bred in 6 litters. I just never even saw it. So I had no dates. And so, but I had been doing it enough time that I kind of knew she would be getting close. And so I always just bring them, make sure they're crated near me, the last week or so. And um, I went to bed one night and she was just outside my master bedroom, but the door was closed. And I woke up. I had heard nothing through the night. She had 8 puppies, perfectly nursing. Everything was clean. I was like, wow, that was magic.
It's funny because I think too, the further along you go, like Mia this last time, she was sleeping with me in the bed, and that was where the first puppy was born. And usually you'd be rushing them off into the whelping box, and you're like, okay, we're just gonna lay here. And I had texted her mom. I was like, nope, I think we're going to bed. I don't think it's gonna be tonight, or maybe it'll be like 3 or 4 or something like that. And 30 minutes later, I was like, oh, the first puppy's here. So it was pretty crazy in terms of like, yeah, just, you know, you never would have put a mom that was like that close to breeding, like in your bed and like, okay, we're just gonna get a
Right.
couple hours of shut eye. And so those funny stories that you do hear, like, oh, it was under my bed or it was in my room or, something like that, as opposed to, you know, when you get the whelping box ready like a month before and everything's all set up and pristine and now it's kind of like, oh, Mia's coming. I don't know,
Yeah.
I should probably get things set up.
You know what always throws me off is when they're like 3, 4 weeks after another litter.
Hmm.
I'm so in the rigmarole of the first litter that I'm like, the time is flying. And I just, a lot of times I'm like, oh crap, we have 2 days. We got to get them in.
Exactly. You gotta clean and reset. And I do have usually the timing, this is a little bit unusual right now where I only have like 3-week-old puppies. Usually have an older set that that I'm working with and doing all my socialization. And then I have the quieter time, the first 4 weeks, which is nice. And that timing is about perfect. I love that. So,
Yeah.
I really love to have, the moms that, they do the first part and then I do the finishing part. But yeah, when you have, that, I wouldn't say close together, but when you're working with one litter and they're getting ready to go and another one's coming, it does seem like puppy time goes really, really fast.
Yeah, it does. It just cruises. And you're like, wait a minute, you're already 5 weeks old. But so you've mentioned a couple of things you do. You have such a great program. You've taken on so much. Can you tell us a little bit of what you did, kind of how you developed it, and yeah, with your
Right. So a lot, I think, a lot of how my experience was I took a lot from puppy culture. I took from badass breeders. That was very common around the COVID time. And, Jeanette was very supportive. But then other groups like yours and other, just online sources and friendships and starting with golden doodles and then with the cavapoos, I noticed a little bit difference in things of when I was raising the golden doodles to the cavapoos. The golden doodles that I had were a little bit older, a little bit bigger. And so I had to adjust down the things and the timing for like what Jeanette has in her. She has like these different stages, like it's for introducing things. So it's like red level, just things that don't move. Maybe it's just climbing on things, and then you move into things with like sound and movement. And so she has these different stages that are based on the puppy's development. And so I had to play around a little bit with cavapoos in terms of them just being maybe a little bit smaller, mainly smaller, I think. And so I would notice like a week or so, they would do things a little bit slower than the larger golden doodles do. And then I just kind of honed in on the things that I saw made the biggest difference. And crate training, for example, was really hard for me personally when I got the dogs from other breeders. And so I started crate training and then I was doing it. A lot of people do it at 5 or 6 weeks. And then I started to kind of edge it back in a certain way so that you know, kind of developed my own system for the cavapoos and how I do it and introduce it. So that was kind of where I started with, was making sure that was like, I really want the families to be able to have the puppies come home and sleep mostly through the night. We can
yeah,
get 6 hours really pretty good. And again, a lot of it's size dependent, right? Because
sure.
my puppies are coming home at around 3 pounds or stuff like that. So they're just not physically like able to go much further than that. But that's kind of where it started with, developing a way of how I do things. And then I had a couple puppies early on get car sick. And so I was like, well, I really need to solve that problem for my families. And so it's been more of like when I get feedback, I think a lot of breeders that's something that I learned early on was in the beginning, if I heard no news, I took that as good news. And I learned really quickly that actually it's better for you as a breeder to reach out to the families and ask for that feedback. And if we don't ask for the feedback, we don't know where the families were struggling or what problems, what was going on and how to fix it. And so I had a couple families say that their puppies got car sick. And so I wanted to really work on helping prevent that. And I mean, I don't know that you can eliminate it all the time, but let's try to do things. And so then I worked on early on, different ways to introduce, the swinging motion and working on car rides earlier than I did, before, maybe just going to the vet or you're doing a couple errands. So, I start hitting those things a little bit earlier. Playpen time. I have a lot of families that work from home. And so I really try to move the puppies around, start individualizing them. So like they're not always used to being in the litter. And so I separate them and I move them around and give them some individual time in a home office setting where they'll be the only puppy and stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff that I have, what you would say, developed in my program is a response to feedback from other families of what they need and kind of, finding we talk about our ideal puppy buyer and what my families are telling me that they need or they want, and me trying to figure out, and sometimes it's trial and that,
Trial and error. Yeah.
trial and error to figure out, is there a way that I can help these puppies get to be where those families need them.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And I think you brought up a really good thing too at the beginning of that, where you said no news is good news. And it is. But you also brought up another great point, which is like for things such as the dog puking in the car, that is only their one dog and their one experience. They might think this is all dogs or normal or not think it's something to bother you with. But you
Mhm.
would have never got that feedback had you not reached out.
Yeah.
So, you're going to know if your dog's sick or if it's got some sort of like problem, you're going to know that because they'll contact you. But for those little things like that, it makes a huge difference, right? Have you noticed a change now going forward?
It really has, and that's one thing I talk about with my families is I do say, look, something that I want you to do is I want you to reach back out with your questions. So last week I had a little puppy and he had been home for a month and the family had said, Kari, he slept wonderfully in his crate all month. And this week, for some reason, she's like, do they backslide or something like that? And so we had to go back and we had to troubleshoot. And what it was that he hadn't been finishing his dinner. And so they were using his dinner to train him in the evening, kind of just have him, finish up that dinner or stuff like that. Well, he didn't get all that through in the evening, and so he had to wake up and go to the bathroom. But they were in an apartment and they were just really afraid that he was going to bark and wake everybody up. And so if they don't have those resources or they don't feel like they can come back and ask a question, I can't really help them. And so I learned that early on too, was that and I know breeders will see this, that you send out this perfect puppy and you don't hear anything for 6 months. And then all of a sudden you get this angry text back that says like, this puppy is not doing this and it's out of control or whatever. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So I do try to, not everybody, but I try my best to let them know that like, if you see something, like they're going to be a teenager and you're going to see some things. And so if you need some help, reach back out and I can give you some ideas. And if not, then we're going to go to, a trainer. We're going to go to Baxter and Bella or something like that. But that relationship, I do let my families know that I do want that feedback. I do want to help them. And I think a lot of breeders are kind of missing that component, that if they they just hear too many complaints. And so then
Yeah.
it doesn't feel good when you're just getting these texts about complaints all
Yeah.
the time.
Oh, exactly. And I think it's hard too, because in the beginning, you aren't sure how to respond. You might not have the answer.
Right.
I know that me troubleshooting, house training was not, I wasn't good at that in the beginning. So I wouldn't have, been able to help them. And I think as you go, but like you said, you have to know these are problems so you can focus on them.
Right.
And so maybe one way that breeders can pitch it if you aren't in a place where you feel confident answering the question, but you need the feedback, is to say, like please help me. I'm always looking to make my lines better, and I need to know where you struggle so I can make decisions. And I've had people contact me, like if like I had a dog that ended up well, he got on some of those oral flea and tick medication, but he ended up getting a GI cancer at 8 years old, and the family still contacted me to let me know. And and that's helpful. That's good information to know, because if everybody in that litter was having this problem, then we have a different problem.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I read something that, I mean, sometimes it's not till generations and generations that you don't find out about those health problems. And so, it could be 10 years down the road and there was a breeding decision that, even if, the family comes back and lets you know, that you can say, oh, okay. But I do have to say, I know that when we started Honeybook and your email series had a follow-up, questionnaire. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I really gonna do this? Like, I'm like, you're almost kind of scared to
I know you don't want
for the
to know.
feedback, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, like, okay, well, is it going to be anonymous, or are we going to let people like go and, basically review you and tell you like where maybe they didn't feel very
Yeah.
supported, or, where you can do better. But I mean, if you come from a place, and talk to your families that really I am, I'm just a person and I am trying to make things better. And so, I do think feedback is a key component that breeders need to ask for. And I do think that you will get less complaints actually if you're, kind of walking with people every couple months, check back on that teething phase, check back on that teenage phase, stuff like that. So, we're
And
always really happy like the first night to check in, and
oh
then,
yeah.
after that you're kind of like, oh, but I think that's super important, and that really helped me grow. And so I would say that's like back to your original question about shaping things that, we want to do better for these puppies. All of us want our puppies to be amazing dogs. And so there's a few things that I have kind of honed in on and kind of made my specialty with some training and socialization, just teaching some calm manners and stuff like that. Really can make a difference for the families. That first month or month and a half, if the puppy already has a little bit of a head start, it can sleep through the night, then the families are more prepared for things that we can't control, accidents in the house. I mean, we can't potty train them completely, but
Right.
if they haven't been waking up every 2 hours, they're going to be a lot more patient, to deal with shark phase or some potty accidents. If the puppy has been in the playpen and had some practice by themselves, then it's going to make, a little bit easier time for that family that has to work from home.
Yeah.
Um, Car rides, a lot of my families just travel. Like the whole reason that they're getting a dog under 20 pounds, a lot of times under 15 pounds, is to travel. And so a lot of work on being an airline carrier. Almost all of my puppies fly out of state. And so I, really, really hit that hard. Being in the car, travel is a big thing. And, I've had reports from my flight nannies that, not my dogs, but other dogs that, get sick when they travel, are really disruptive on the airplane or something like that. So that's, again, maybe it's out of fear, but I don't want my families to have to experience that, or not be able to take their dogs somewhere. Like they're getting these dogs because they really want to travel and be with them, but if every time they knew they were going to get in the car or the puppy was going to scream on the airplane, they just wouldn't take them. And so, those are kind of the things that I've focused on is the feedback from my families, knowing what your families need. So if you have, of course, our friends that have the livestock guardian dogs, I mean, they're trained for that. But, if
Sure.
you have a clientele that really wants to do dog sports or something like
Mhm.
that, the things that you can do to kind of help them, help their families, you can really kind of find a niche for you, to kind of tailor your program for your ideal customer.
No, I love it. And I think you're so on point to bring up how we can prepare the dogs and give them a little bit of head start. Because I think at the end of the day, what gives our dogs the highest quality of life? And it's if they meet the needs of their family.
Yes.
And so their family is like, I want a dog that does this. And when it does that, the dog gets taken everywhere. They brag about them. They're the background on their phone, their Facebook profile picture, all these things. And if that is a miserable time and they weren't prepared, or then the dog ends up being more work than they expected, and maybe if it's things we can prevent, even better. That does it. It just eats away at that relationship.
And something I would say to our community or something like that is that what I've learned is that you need to niche down very, very specific. And so a lot of breeders are just trying to sell to family pets to everybody. But that's actually not really the best strategy. You need to really find like, and I know that you do this with your dogs, just a few really specific personality types or family types, and then you develop your program based on that. Not just like, you know, wonderful family dog for everything. Like that's not going to be effective in finding the right fit.
Yeah, exactly. It's too vanilla, and people don't know if it's right for them or not. And I think, the joke is the riches are in the niches. When you have exactly what those people are looking for and they can't get it anywhere else, you can charge a higher price. And I'm all about it. Yeah.
So learning what you can do, what kind of dogs you like to raise. Like, if you really like to train dogs and stuff like that, and you're really good at it, then that should be your focus. And then, your families are going to come to you for that expertise, or, if they're really good at nose work or, something like that. So we don't have to sell to everybody. And I learned, that like, I don't have to sell all over the country either. I mean, I do have a lot of families that come in now, but I know you do a really good job of, a lot of your families are really pretty close. And, so, you know, it's for a specific area, a specific family type, and, a specific need. And the more that you can focus your marketing and your program on that, I think that's where you'll, find some of the
Mhm.
biggest success. And then show what you do. Like that's the main thing that I hear from my families is they're just like, thank you for showing me what you do. And, that gives me the confidence in, your dogs or your puppies or something like that, be proud of what you do and how you raise your dogs, and, tell the world like, you know, why your dogs are great, and let people know.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think you do that so well on your Instagram. Do you want to share a little bit about how you do your Instagram?
I do. So, a lot of my Instagram is clips from I film my day pretty much, carry my phone around, and it's nothing fancy. So I'm usually not setting up things for Instagram. I'm not like creating content for Instagram. They're just videos that I've taken for my families during the day. So what I have is an album that I send my families almost every day. Like right now, the puppies don't do much, right? So it's like, okay, well, here's our whelping box novelty item. Here's her nursing or something like that. But when they get, eating their mush or whatever, it's, 10 minutes of them eating their mush, and then that goes up to an album, and the families can see all of that. So they're seeing their puppies, from birth all the way through. Sometimes it's 500 or 600 videos. So it's a lot, but the families love that. And of course, I don't expect them to watch all of that, but a lot of times I'm teaching through that.
Yeah.
So I might be explaining, what's going on while I'm doing something, maybe a training video. I give them, not all just the wins. Like sometimes the puppy's not doing what I'm trying to get them to do. And I'm saying, like, look, this is normal puppy behavior. When they go home, they're not going to just sit on the mat and, look perfectly for you.
Right.
But so for Instagram, I do take a lot of just clips from um, those videos, and usually try to explain a little bit about, what's going on or why I'm doing something like that, and helping people understand, like, what the reason is, how did I get them to mand or sit, or why am I doing this? Trying to think what other things, but a lot of it I try to show, the reasons behind things, and
Hmm.
so that's what usually goes on Instagram, are those little tiny clips. And so it doesn't take me a lot of extra time. Like people are like, oh, social media, I just hate it. It takes so much time. I'm already doing those things. I'm already filming those things. I use Chat GPT a lot, and I will ask them, like, I have a video of a puppy eating mush, and I'm like, okay, give me 5 ideas of a reel that I can create that, explains something about, the transition on what we feed them, or, what does weaning look like? So anyway, you can ask AI a lot to give you some ideas, and you just tell them, like, what video you have. And sometimes it comes up with some good ideas.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. No, it's a great place to brainstorm for sure. Yeah, so I
And
love it.
then,
Hmm.
using your stories, again, a lot is, most people love to just flip through stories really quick. So, if you're doing something, 30 seconds, just show that transparency. Something else I do that I get a lot of feedback from, that a lot of breeders don't do, is, I I do spend a lot of time with my families, like really trying to make sure that we are getting the right fit. And I don't approve all my applications. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, like there's like some people that, for example, they have a lot of really little kids and stuff like that. And I said, you know what, I don't have little kids in my program. They're not exposed to a lot of little kids, like, not that my puppy buyers, you know, nobody has little kids, but when it's something that I kind of felt, the family that it's like, you know, everybody's under 5 years old or something like that, I really felt that, like, it would probably be suited for a breeder that, they were carried around by a 3-year-old or something like that.
Right.
And so, really making sure that, we are making a good match with the family and what you can do, and talking to families. A lot of families that I talk to say nobody's ever, taken the time to really find out, you get the form
Mm.
and you fill it out or whatever, and then it's like logistics. So like, okay, well, here, you can send me this money or whatever, but I like to really kind of, you know, find out a lot of more about what they need. And
Mhm.
so I think we could benefit from that. And it does take a lot of time. So uh,
Have you noticed that doing some marketing, because I know you did a lot of work on your website to kind of get situated with
mhm.
everything. Did you find that shifting some of that marketing had helped you once you were aware of the ideal puppy buyer you were working with? Did you start
Yeah,
doing that
absolutely.
over?
And the same with Instagram, any, I think, social media. I, you don't need thousands and thousands of followers. Like, the idea is not to grow your Instagram so big. Like, I remember, and a lot of breeders still do this, they'll run contests, and it'll be like, um, you know, $50 if you comment and like and share or stuff like that. And their idea is they think if they just, keep growing their Instagram and making it bigger and we get more followers. The problem is a lot of those followers, they're not there to buy a puppy. They don't have any intent to purchase from you or learn from you. And people don't understand those become ghost followers. And so they actually hurt your social media. And so you don't want to do those kind of things. You want to find followers that really care about what you're doing and about, what you're all about, not just about, growing your Instagram and making it bigger. You want to grow with the right people. And so, if you only got 5 new followers a day or a week, a day, nobody these days gets 5 new followers a day. A week or something like that, you only need one of those to love your program and get on your wait list. And
Right.
so I think that is really important when people are like, oh, my Instagram's really not doing anything, or I'm not really growing. It's really hard to grow right now. But you want to have the right kind of followers, not just numbers.
Yeah. Oh, it's such an important point. So yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. So
Yeah.
good. Mhm.
And I really haven't seen, I know we talked about the website, trying to grow an email list. Like that's always a good idea. And, a lot of the things like in Dog Breeder Society, you really help people set up like a structure, right? So it's not just, it's all these different pieces that really need to work together. I think I found Dog Breeder Society, I may have told you from Honeybook. I was like, okay, I have all these applications and they're just in my email. And so your email comes in and it's like cluttered. And then how do you find an application? And then you're going back and forth. And now you can't find an email and you put it in a folder. And so all of this stuff like from management. And then I was like, okay, started, there's got to be a better way to manage people and systems and contracts. And that's where we found, I found Honeybook and then I found you in the master class. But, digging in, you just have all these other infrastructure things for dog breeders to help them, whether it's, social media, email, website, stuff like that, because you need all of those pieces to work together to really streamline your business. And my business is pretty streamlined now. So like the application comes in, it comes to Honeybook. I have an automated email that goes out and then they automatically can schedule a time to talk to me. Before I was texting people, like I get an application, I'd email and I'd text back and forth. And again, clearly that was a lot of work
Yeah.
and took a lot of time. And then what time is good for you? I can do this time. Oh, that time doesn't work well for me,
Right.
and I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way. So let's set up the automated scheduling. So there's a little bit of maybe impersonal amount, but I think, people realize that, they pick a time that's good for them. And then if they cancel or something like that, it's like, oh, okay, no worries. But just streamlining, some of that stuff is really nice.
Yeah, and I would actually say that a lot of buyers, I think the last few years, ever since COVID, are very appreciative of those things. They love the fact that at 11 o'clock at night, when they finally are going through their email, they can click and schedule that call with you
Hmm.
without texting you and waiting for the response. And so I've found them to be, even though it's in theory less personal, it's actually become more catered to them, and they're pretty happy about it.
Right. And just the automated like emails or, I send out a brochure. Some
Mhm.
people send long emails. I find that a lot of people don't read emails. They'd rather have like a pretty picture of a puppy,
Visual.
a little bit of visual, and stuff like that. And it's just not overload, like a wall of text on social media. People don't read that. They do a lot better with speaking. If you're doing a voiceover on a reel, that's easier for them if they're listening in the car or they have their AirPods in or something like that. A lot of breeders will make this little tiny font on there. And I'm like, look, I'm way too old. I have to like take a picture and zoom in. So just kind of, think about those things. But I think the biggest thing that you can do to, to stand out is to, bring in that personalization and, reach out to people. And then, like I said, not a huge wall of text and, like, because again, we'll send out our emails and then we'll talk about, and we've talked about this in Dog Breeder Society before, and then you're re-explaining things that they're like, well, I know I sent that in my email, you know,
Yeah.
before, and remind them. Even in Go Home, I have a pretty unique thing called a Go Home meeting, because even though I've spent 8 weeks sending emails about dog food and
Yeah.
vaccinations and stuff like that, we still touch base before the puppies go home and
Sure.
remind them, because I will get those calls like, oh, what was the food I was supposed to buy?
Right. Yep. Oh, I know. I know. Yep. No, I think it helps, but I love it too because HoneyBook, you can always just, if they just need the dog food information, you just quickly send it to them. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just makes it
It
so much
that
better.
that probably has been one of the biggest game changer things for me in organization. I can move things along. I can see when the contract is signed, it's right there. All the contact information, as opposed to searching through your email of just like,
Yeah.
then you didn't put it in the folder or you didn't tag it. Or I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but like things evaporate into mystery
Not just you.
email. Like I don't know where they go. They just disappeared. So yeah, HoneyBook keeps things really nice management wise. I can, you know, pull that back up with a mom and, have it labeled, and I can, find what litter it was easily, stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I love it. I just love it for the simplicity. I mean, I was in that place where I was like, man, I'm gonna have to hire someone. This is becoming a mess. And then I was like, I don't have a system to even hand them. It would not be any better.
Right.
So
And
yeah, I just fixed
I
it.
still use because you probably use something like, do you use like a management tool for your dogs yourself with like heat cycles and family trees and stuff like
Mhm.
that? So like,
I don't, but
oh, you don't.
I
Okay.
don't have a large enough program that it's
Yeah.
probably not a
So you
big
don't
deal.
have like Dog Breeder Pro or Dog
No,
Cloud Pro.
I
Okay.
kind of know, but all my dogs pretty much cycle on 6 months. So it's very easy because I'll be like, oh, the puppy's going home on this day. Oh, I know that they'll be coming in heat in 4 months. And
Ah,
it's
interesting.
pretty easy. I'm lucky that way. But I'm only managing about 8 females, so it's not too bad.
Yeah. And how about like pedigrees or whatever? Do
I
you
have a
already?
weird ability to remember everybody who I've bred ever. Like I know I'm weird that way. So I don't really like people can be like, "Oh, I got this sock." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I remember that socks and boot." You know?
Wow.
Like it's just weird. So I'm lucky. So for me
Yeah,
it's
that's
it's it's
impressive.
easy, but I also have a structure in how I did breeding, so it was
Yes.
very systemized, I guess. So maybe that helps. But I am weird.
Yeah,
Um
I think because your lines are pretty um established now, don't you have?
Yes, I'm definitely doing line breeding, going back in generations and bringing some stuff in or out crosses and bringing them back. Like things I've been planning for 3 or 4 years are coming to fruition. So like that's
Mhm.
nice. But I would say that my stuff is much simpler than, well, I think you're in multi-gens, I'm imagining now. So
We're getting to multi-gen,
yeah, so
so
you
that's
naturally have more
that's
demand.
my should speak to that. That's my goal, is to have Cavapoos that are free of IVDD. That's something I'm actively trying to breed out in the breed. That would be my long-term goal. So all fully furnished, wavy coats, wavy or straight coats, so that we get those allergy friendly, characteristics of like the F1B, but I want at least 50% Cavalier genes for personality wise. So I really want to have the most Cavalier with the least amount of the Cavalier health issues, whether it
Yeah.
be, DM, back problems with IVDD. Of course we don't, are not, um, can't get completely rid of it of an F1 because all Cavaliers carry that gene. But my goal is pretty much clear multi-gens. And I spent the first year trying to wait for that unicorn that he was already like the stud that was fully furnished, wavy, clear, like it just never happened. So I was like, okay, it's gonna take a couple generations and I'm gonna just have to make my own. So it is a long process to get there, but yeah, those are my goals. And I think I love F1s. Like I love the temperament of them. I love the wavy coat for my family's, ease and the look. And a lot of my families, they love F1s, but I would say over 50% of people of applications that I get that are looking for a doodle because they have some amount of allergy or sensitivities and they've been told that we have to have an F1B. And I said, I can get pretty darn close with my F1s. Usually, um, uh, as long as the parents, the Cavalier, have like two low shed genes, and then the poodles also do. Most people do fine enough with that, but I do want to just get to that multi-gen to, you know, kind of hone in on that. So those would
Oh,
be
that
my
makes sense.
long-term program goals. And and if I could have Cavapoos that were all clear, I think that would make again, that would definitely, I would say, be a big thing in the Cavapoo world. I don't know. How do I want to say this with being nice? But people that don't like agree with uh breeding doodles, right? They
Mm-hmm.
are opposed to breeding doodles that, I would say like, I really made a big difference in, breeding to improve the breed if I could
Sure.
do that.
Absolutely. No, I think you do such a good job anyway. But and in all fairness, look at what you're dealing with. Every single one of my dogs is a low shedding dog by the genetics because that's a short hair. But it's just what it is, and it's the same in my rat terrier. So I mean, my stuff is so much simpler. So when I look at everything you're putting together, it's generations of goal coming together.
But you were looking for more personality characteristics. Like you were looking for that lower prey drive dog. So
I
that's
needed
kind of
a
hard
dog that
too.
was birdie that had an off switch but would still make the guys look good in front of their friends when they
Right.
didn't train them, you know? So like that was my goal. But I mean, I got to it. I was very lucky with my foundation stud. He was that dog. And then he was just his metabolism was so high. He was 55 pounds. I had to feed him like he was 85 pounds. And it was like, so people would like take him out hunting and like the next day they'd be like, he's so skinny. And it's like they would lose so much weight in 24 hours just running in the heat. They weren't
Wow.
hungry. They were burning energy. It was one time I remember calculating he ate as many calories in a day as I did, and I weighed 3 times what he weighed. I was like, so anyway, but then I brought in German lines and that brought the metabolism down and so that really helped. But then I got big again. I had some huge dogs, then I had to bring it down. But
Luckily,
yeah,
do people probably don't aren't as concerned with the size though as
correct.
much with your
I
dog?
I can have a litter. This is so crazy. I can breed a female who's 40 pounds to a stud who's 80, no problem at all in my dogs. And they will be fine whelping 11 puppies that way. And then when when my buyers are looking, they don't care at all.
Right.
Like if the right dog for them is 15, 20 pounds heavier than what they originally told me they wanted, they're like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
And they know that like that's completely unfathomable for a lot of breeds. Like my rat terriers, if I was like, well, this one's 20, this one's 40, people would be like, what? You
Right,
know,
right. Yeah. Well, they're not trying to stuff them under the seat of an airplane either. So,
correct. Yes. No, 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 no. They're just more like, I don't know that I want to have an 80-pound thing that can jump 6 foot walls. you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
very, yeah.
But so sometimes it's a little bit easier for me in terms of like things I can test for and see. You're looking more on like, well,
I have to watch. Yeah.
abstract. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always watching. And so I think my big goal this upcoming year is to like create a way for people to design their own temperament tests. Because I do, and I don't use a rubric, but I'm like, oh, well, I just watch them. And people are like, great, Julie, that's very helpful. Not helpful at all. but I know what I'm looking for, but I have to articulate it. But I think every breeder can get to a place where they have their own temperament test. And if I was to say who's the most cuddly of your dogs, you would know. And who's your biggest eater, you would know. And so if we
Yeah,
started to put it all together, you could track all those things. You probably know them.
I know them, and then something that I talk about too is just the way that I do things, and the families have watched for so long
Yeah.
that a lot of times I don't let those extremes get too far, like stratified, for example. So if I see a quiet puppy, or a little bit shyer puppy, just the way that, I'm structuring the day's activity, then we go back and we take a step back and we try to hit the same objective, like learning objective in a different way. And usually I can get that puppy up to the litter mates, with a day or two. So I really am able to bring a lot of those down, more
You're
towards the
using
middle.
essentially training and socialization to adjust temperament differences so
Hmm.
that everybody ultimately gets a dog that they enjoy, which I think is
Exactly.
great. And me being the idiot I am, or was in the beginning at least, I didn't really understand how that would play into it. So all I knew to do was watch, and if I didn't like it, I wouldn't keep it. So then I ended up keeping a temperament that I fell in love with. So now my dogs are very repeatable. You can kind of get
Right.
anyone in a litter and it's or whatever.
And there is definitely something to that. Like I know that a certain mom pairings, like all of the puppies, I'm like, I could keep every single puppy in this litter, and they have gone home and we're on like litter 3 and have had like zero issues from that, right?
I
So
love that.
that as breeders are beginning, and you don't know like exactly what you get. I mean, sometimes you have to go through a couple moms and a couple pairings and stuff like that before you kind of hone into
Sure.
that. And so I think there is something about keeping your own dogs versus just keep buying and bringing things in. I would say to really try to keep your own and then work within that. And that's where we're getting into like uh, uh, a couple of them are going to be on second or third generations for me. For example, I've used the stud from Maple, who the golden doodle that's now retired. We kept a boy from her, and he has been in my program a little bit with some golden cavapoos. And so those are temperaments that I'm going to add back in. I've only done golden cavapoos with a few of my moms, mainly that they were really small, and I had a really hard time finding a stud in a Cavapoo that worked with that particular mom, because Cavaliers by nature are a lot bigger. And
Yeah.
so I don't like to mix those really big Cavalier genes. And Cavaliers about the smallest, like I think the smallest studs that we can find around here are maybe listed at 12. I don't know if that's really actually true. They probably are maybe a little bit closer to 14, but even when
Mhm.
they have, maybe they're listed at a certain weight, they still maintain the bigger Cavalier genes, right? So if you go back to Embark, they still say they have genes that could be like 19 pounds. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
they're gonna
And
breed a lot
can
bigger than
a lot
what.
more variety. I know it's interesting because I've had a couple embark situations where I had a dog, he's 55 pounds, like, and I would consider him a small stud. They tell me on embark he'll be 72 pounds. I'm like, well, he's 2.5. He's not getting any bigger. So it is weird. But a lot of times you're right. When you see that larger number, you can get that outcross later.
And does he throws, he's probably thrown some big puppies,
He
like
did.
bigger
I
than.
had two in the last litter that'll probably be 65, 70 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's what I use that number for from Embark. So if I most of my moms, for example, are hitting a very similar number, because I think what that means is, the amount of small poodle or the amount of like
Sure.
smaller genes in there is telling Embark that that's small. But if they have that potential to be in there, then I had a litter where the boy was like 19 and the girl was like 7. It was like insane difference. But, you know, the stud was listed at being bigger, and even though he was himself small, he was
Yeah.
just the smallest in the litter, and his litter mates, I don't know what they were, but they were probably bigger. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah. I think definitely like two generations of selected small dogs makes a lot of ground. Like I've seen that. But but not, that it does take a second. It takes a second. But I like I love the 40-pound GSPs because you can just kind of scoop them up and take them with you. They're just easy.
you but you have a truck and you have
Oh yeah.
land and stuff like that. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
much easier. Like our house, like with Gouda, because she's about 45. So she has a lab. Did I speak to
You
that? So I
mentioned
have the
all of
lab.
your dogs are making me hungry. You got Gouda and Bagel and
Oh, yeah.
Maple and
That's so funny. Well, Gouda, the interesting thing that some people might not know is Gouda is a guide dog in training. My daughter always wanted to do this program at her school where the class is that the kids get these guide dogs and they get to be puppy raisers for them. And so Maddie had always wanted to do that since she was in middle school. And so she went to a high school that had that program and we did one and that was Kiko. That was our first experience and she did make it. She is a working guide dog in California. So Gouda is our second one. All of the puppies in the litter, how they do it is it's on a letter. And so that whole litter will be G names. And so she came from, the G litter and she's
got it.
Gouda. And then that name stays with them forever. I'm trying to remember what other things. It was a really fun process the first time around because Guide Dogs for the Blind would send out this puppy truck and then the kids would go and meet the puppy truck and then this little guy came out and he would give clues as to the name so you don't know the name of the dog that you're going to get and he would give clues and the kids would try to guess and stuff like that. So I can't remember what the clues were for Kiko. And then Gouda, it wasn't quite as much. I don't think they're doing the puppy truck anymore. I can't remember why that is, but yeah, it's something interesting with guide dogs for the blind. So they're all kind of named after a letter in the
So
litter.
fun. It's quite possibly my favorite cheese too. So there's that. Yeah. Well, Carrie, thanks so much for coming on the show. It has been such a pleasure hearing your story and learning, and thanks for answering all my questions because I had a lot of questions this time around. But before we go, can you share with us advice for new breeders, people just getting started? What do you got?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I take away from my experience over the past couple years is to not get so wrapped up in and this is a philosophy that I keep now, don't just produce dogs to produce dogs, really reach out to your families and find out what they need and do a really, really good job focusing on meeting their needs and raising really, really good puppies. And then show your families and, show the world like why we're doing a good thing and make connections. That's the biggest thing that for me is my why, is the people that I meet, the stories that I hear about. I have made a couple really impactful connections for people, just very moving stories, probably people that will be lifelong friends forever. And that's what, keeps me going, doing better. If we're going to raise these puppies and, take care of them and, give them a better life for these families to just do the best job that you can and don't get wrapped up in numbers and growing. I think too many breeders think about growing too fast and they just want to just let's just have another litter, they're always looking, ahead of like, the next litter or something like that, and focus on doing a really good job with the puppies and, the families, and they're going to come back. They're going to tell their friends. I mean, now I'm getting a lot of, people that, I've met your dogs out, my neighbor has a dog of yours, my daughter, my daughter has the puppies, and so, your name and what you're doing for families is kind of the best marketing that you can do. And I think, seasoned breeders that have done that would tell you the same thing, that like my dogs almost sell themselves for me. And, people love to, talk about their dog and, how great of a start they had and what a great breeder they came from. And so that's, love your dogs, love your families, and really work hard to do the best for them.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So good. Such good advice.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was so much fun.
It was, yeah, it was fun. Tell us where people can find you.
So Instagram is where most of my magic happens. It's Choice Paws with an underscore, I think it is, in between. I do have a little bit on Facebook. I don't know, like Facebook doesn't love me, and my website, but really Instagram, I think if you kind of want to see, what we do, how I do it, how, what it looks like to show, things that I am doing or what you're doing, and just kind of, how to, how to put that out to the world. I think a lot of what people do is they just, show the cute little picture and show the puppy. I think we can do so much more, and families really love that. There's some awesome buyers over on Instagram. There's some people that are like, I never get any leads on there, but they're there. So.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much.
And then come join the Honest Dog Breeders Society, right?
Hey, yes, absolutely. Come see us on the inside. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you make the time to show up to the live calls, and
I love that community, right? So I message people, back and forth, and we have a really great core group that seems to show up there every time, and very helpful. It's a small group, but I think it's a pretty close-knit group, so I really like it.
I agree. Yeah, no judgment. It's just easy. Bring whatever you need. So
I can't wait to see who else, from that you find. Okay.
Oh yes, they're gonna be good. They're doing good.
What a great idea. Well, thank you, Julie, for having me. I really had a great time.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. If you found this episode helpful, please tap that like button. It helps me better understand you and supports the channel. If you're a current or aspiring dog breeder, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel to be notified when new videos come out. Thanks.